For the first time ever, I got sold something in my living room. I looked over and I was like, Alexa, what's my notification? And it said,
Brian, you have something in your shopping cart. Would you like me to order it?
and I was like, and I had the thought, like, this is fucked up. I'm being sold to.
But also you're like, that's a good deal. Who doesn't love a good deal?
And I said yes. Like, how strong
What
do you
was
have
it?
to be to...
What was it, Brian? What was it?
I honestly can't remember.
It was a foxtail butt plug. But, I mean, whatever. That's neither here
Well,
nor
maybe
there.
that is a need.
To be honest, they're almost never on sale. So.
They're almost never on sale. So.
All right. Well, yeah. So, all right, we're here. We're hanging out with our good pal Jess, Jessica Moorhouse, the woman who knows all things financial wealth, financial health, and author of a new book, Everything But Money, which is going to be available by the time this comes out. So, we'll get into that. But before we get into all that, I'm gonna get very selfish here. And this is the entire reason I brought you on the show, outside of the fact that I really want to promote your book and get people more in line with better money decisions. But more so than that, I really just wanted to get you on to talk about the RDSP so I can wrap my own head around it. Because I'm starting to become, ever since we ever first spoke, you were a guest on the show in the past. I was lucky to be on your podcast as well. And you really shifted the way that I think about money. And of course, I don't think about money in a historically have not thought about it in a good way.
Jerry started budgeting and everything. It was
God.
dude, crazy.
That makes me so happy.
But Jerry, you mentioned the acronym RDSP.
RDSP.
And I'm sure that this is relevant to a lot of our listeners. But what does RDSP stand for?
The Registered Disability Savings Plan. So I don't have an RRSP. I have an RDSP. Now, I don't know. I think the RRSP is the Registered Retirement Savings Plan.
You got it. Yeah.
All right. So,
what's the difference between the two?
Well,
Very different.
Yeah.
They
and
sound
also,
so similar though, and that's why
they do.
People may not even. That's the thing with the RDSP. So I have an online investing course, and this is one of the lessons on different account types. Most people in Canada have no idea about an RDSP, and part of it could be because, there isn't enough information about it, but it's not applicable. Not everyone can have it. So the only people who can open up an RDSP are people who get the disability tax credit. And it's really, it's not even, it hasn't even been around that long too. So it's fairly new in terms of account types. It's only been around since 2008. And just to give you a reference, the TFSA tax-free savings account became a thing in 2009. And so it hasn't been around for that long. So it's not surprising that some people are like, I've never even heard of that, but I've heard of the RRSP that's been around for decades. But the difference is that from the RRSP to the RDSP, anyone can open up an RRSP as long as you're making some taxable income. You're going to accrue RRSP contribution room, and the real purpose of that is you put money in, invest it, let it grow. So when you retire, you can pull that money out and live off that money. And the RDSP is a little bit like that. Like the real purpose is for you to be able to put money in, or other people can put money in for you. And then it can grow. You don't pay tax on that money while it is in the account. So you're deferring tax, very similar to an RRSP. You don't, however, get a tax deduction when you contribute to an RDSP. So that's one thing to kind of consider. But there's a lot of great benefits to an RDSP if you qualify.
And what does that mean? You don't get a tax benefit
deduction
if you contribute to it. So let's say I'm like, hey, I just found $5,000 on the floor today. Holy shit, it's my fucking day. I'm going to put that into my RDSP.
Yeah.
I get taxed on that money that I put into it?
No, so that's the great thing. When you contribute to an RDSP, you're essentially putting in after-tax dollars. So you've already paid your income tax on that money, likely, because it's like from your income or something like that.
I said I found it on the floor.
Okay, well, don't tell the government.
Copy that. I actually was given to me by my boss.
But yeah, it's considered after-tax dollars. So
Got it.
you put it in there. You don't get a tax deduction. So when you make a contribution to an RRSP, you do get a tax deduction. So what that means is you're putting in basically pre-tax dollars. But what that also means is when you pull that money out when you are retired, you pay tax on those withdrawals. So you're deferring tax. It's not like it's, oh, I just don't pay tax and I get a tax break. No, we're just waiting into the future to pay those taxes. And the logic with the RRSP is that you're going to be in a much lower tax bracket in retirement compared to your working years. So you'll save money by deferring those taxes into the future.
Okay, so just so that I'm clear, I'm going to try to repeat back a bit of what you just said. So let's say I make $50,000 a year, and it cost me $40,000 to live. I keep maybe $5,000 in my bank account, and so I have $5,000 extra that I want to put into my RRSPs because I don't qualify for an RDSP. So when I put that $5,000 in, I'm now paying tax on my income as if I made $45,000 a year.
Yeah, it will
instead
lower
of
your
50.
taxable income by $5,000. But
I
that
will
just
pay
to make
that
you
tax.
just to confuse you a little bit more, you can make a contribution to your RRSP and you can claim that contribution as a tax deduction on your taxes. But you don't have to in the year you make that contribution. A lot of people, they make contributions to their RSPs and then they, maybe work with their accountant to decide how much contributions should we deduct from our taxes and how much should we save for the future. So you can actually carry forward those tax deductions, which is a great reason if, you're in a low tax bracket, but you want to contribute to an RSP now, but you actually don't need the tax break. Save those deductions for the future when you're in a higher tax bracket, maybe further along in your career, you're in a higher income, and then you can. Oh, great! Now you have a more tax deductions available to lower your taxes.
Okay.
So yeah.
So here's the other part of the RDSP that I believe I heard at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong. Now, if I heard. And I feel like, I don't know if it was my mom that told me this, because I think my mom was the one that opened up the RDSP for me. If I contribute an X amount of money, let's say I contribute that $5,000 that I found on the floor, but really was given to me by my boss, and I put that in, the government will match that up to $10,000, a max of $10,000 for the year.
So depends. So
okay.
That's one of the biggest benefits of the RDSP and why it is set up to help people who have a disability. This is a great way to help them get a little bit more money from the government for free as long as you qualify. And so when you make a contribution or someone else makes a contribution on your behalf, which is really great because not everyone who maybe qualifies for an RDSP can work, or they may not have enough money to contribute. You can get other people in your family, for instance, to do that. When you make a contribution, you can get some Canada Disability Savings Grant money, but also if you're lower income, you can get some Canada Disability Savings Bond money. So not everyone will get the bond money. It really depends on your income, and you get a lifetime bond limit of $20,000, and you can get up to, I believe, $70,000 in grant money, because I remember doing the calculations a little while longer, so hopefully this is still accurate. Things haven't updated, but if you were to get the maximum amount of grant and bond money, you can get $90,000 from the government. Okay. Again, it's not that simple. You don't get $90,000 right away. There's annual caps, and there's lots of rules and stuff like that, which I think trips people up. And that's the most complex thing of the RDSP is the people that need this account may not be in a capacity to learn all the ins and outs. So you really do need someone to maybe set up the account for you who really does understand the rules, who can advocate for you, maybe getting a financial planner in there who really understands RDSP so they can set it up properly. Because the other thing is RDSPs are great, but just like an RRSP or a TFSA, it's just a container that you put money into. You don't want to just leave it in cash because then it's not going to grow. One of the benefits, again, of the RDSP is you can defer paying tax on any of its growth, whether that's interest, dividends, or capital gains. We want that money to grow. So sitting in cash, you're not going to get that much over the years. You want to invest that money. But I think a lot of people set it up, just like I see this with people with RRSPs. I have an RRSP. You're like, great, what's it invested in? They're like, I don't know. And then it's just sitting in cash for years. So you really want to make sure it's being invested.
Okay. So just to confirm again, to make sure I understand, when you put your money into whether it's an RRSP or RDSP, that is really just another account that money is living in. And
it's just
sort
an
of
account.
It goes into this like behind this sort of wall, if you think of it that way, where you can't necessarily just withdraw it and you spend it as cash. But if you just leave it in that container and don't actually use that container to buy investments or invest in some way, then it's just sort of living there, not.
Yeah, it's just basically like a savings account. It's just a savings account. Basically,
this big container has two buttons: a green one and a red one. The red one is just be a container. The green button is be a container, but also all the money in the container, let's put it into crypto. No, just joking.
Oh my gosh, no.
let's put it into like to invest it. So you and you choose what kind of investments you want that to go into. So like for me, I have my container and I have all the money that I've put into my RDSP up to this point in my life. It's being invested in a certain
GameStop.
It's being invested, and you choose like the profile you want to invest, right? So it's like, do you want to be higher risk, lower risk?
And who's managing
Well, it depends
that?
on where you set up your RDSP. So that's why it's really important when you want to set up this account or someone's doing it for you. When you're looking for an RDSP issuer, which is just like a bank or a discount brokerage or whatever, you want to first decide, what do we want to do with this money? And this is the same advice for, again, any account type. If you're setting up an RRSP or a TFSA before opening up, but RBC, you should find out, well, what do I want to do with this money? And does RBC actually have the capacity to do what I want with it? And so don't just go to the bank and say, I want to open up an RDSP. Make sure that, if you want to invest in a portfolio of ETFs, for example, can they do that for you? They may not be able to. So in that case, you may want to find a different RDSP issuer. And so just to kind of, high level of what you can do with your money, when it comes to investing, any kind of account, your options really are to, do it on your own. This is called self-directed investing. You open up a discount brokerage account, such as a Questrade, a Wealthsimple Trade, whatever, and then you invest that money in stocks, ETFs, other kind of securities. You can then, or if you don't want to do it on your own, most people aren't comfortable with that. They're especially just getting started. You can open up an account at a robo-advisor. And so the big ones in Canada are like Wealthsimple Invest, Modern Advisor, CI Direct Investing, things like that. Basically, they have a portfolio of pre-built portfolios of index ETFs. You go through a little questionnaire, then they suggest this is the right portfolio for you. Then they invest your money in that portfolio for you. A little bit of an extra fee for that management, but it's a pretty great way to get it done. Or you can go the old school traditional way, hire an advisor, work with a wealth management firm. They will either build a portfolio from scratch for you or likely sell you a portfolio of mutual funds, especially if you go to the bank. That's probably what they're going to sell you. And then they will manage that money for you. So you've got some options, but it's important to know what are those options and what are the pros and cons with all those.
It sounds like not that you're making any recommendations from here, but the fact that you are bringing all of these different options up sounds like, it's not as simple as like, this is the best thing.
No. Yeah, I wouldn't be like, open up your RDSP here. It's like, it's not. I wish it was more simple. And the annoying fact is, in my investing course, I have some spreadsheets where once a year I update what are all the discount brokerages in Canada, robo-advisors, and what are the different accounts that they offer. Unfortunately, as of at least in the spring when I did my little last audit, no robo-advisors in Canada offer an RDSP. So that's really disappointing because that's, I think, a great platform for a lot of people. There are, however, some discount brokerages, not a ton, that offer RDSPs. Let me just check those. The ones that I've got listed that offer an RDSP currently are National Bank Direct and TD Direct Investing. Two out of like dozens, or not dozens, but at least, 15 or something like that. And then that's why most people open up an RDSP with the bank or wealth management firm, because a lot more of them offer that account type.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so fuck, Jessica, you know so much about money. Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Oh my gosh, yes. You know what's funny though that you asked that? I did write a book. It does have money in the title, but if you open it, it is not going to be about RDSPs or budgeting or debt or anything kind of any of the practical information I just shared with you. That's really not what the book is about at all. It really is about everything but money. And so the reason I wrote this particular book is, number one, I've had the privilege over the past 10 years to interview some amazing, smart people in the financial field who have written books about how to money. But I wanted to write a book for everyone who has read those books, have listened to those podcast episodes, have done their research, and still cannot figure out why, for the life of them, no matter what they do, they can't progress in their financial life. They're like, I have the information. It's not a financial literacy issue. And it's not maybe even I don't have the money issue. I have money. I just keep on messing up. I keep on overspending. I keep on spending money in a way that makes me feel bad. I keep on feeling bad about money in general.
Wow,
is
that's
there a
me.
book for that? And so the book really came from the idea that most people's struggles with money actually have more to do with everything but money, not money itself. Yeah.
What would you say is one of those top issues? Like what's one issue that out of all this work where you went, okay, surprising, or not a surprise, you know?
Well, I'd say the one that's not really a big surprise, but it was nice to interview I interviewed a lot of people from my audience. I just did a call out and did a ton of interviews of real people all across Canada and the US. And I asked them, like, what's your money story? Tell me about your upbringing. How did your parents talk about money? Was it a good or bad thing? What are some lessons you learned indirectly, directly? And the thing that we can, no matter who you are, our financial journeys start really young. Mine started at 4 years old. That was the first kind of interaction and that with money, and that was my first money memory. And there's a exercise in the book that helps people elicit that first money memory to kind of see where things started. You're like, oh my gosh, that event I didn't realize had a big impact on the rest of my financial life because I was so young and I didn't realize it really kind of stuck with me. But the thing that surprised me was the fact that a lot of us have experienced trauma, which even in the book, there's like a section where it's like more than a buzzword, but most of us have experienced trauma or witnessed trauma or some form of trauma that's living inside us that has maybe nothing to do with money, that's making a really big and possibly negative impact on your financial life. And until you figure out what that is and find those tools to help you heal from it so you can digest it and actually really properly move on, you're going to stay in the same cycle, the same patterns for the rest of your life until you do something about it. So that was really interesting to find out.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Yeah. So one example I give is if you came from a household growing up where maybe you were kind of put down, dismissed, made to feel smaller than, came from a kind of a somewhat abusive financial background or not financial background, upbringing. This can influence you in adulthood because it may have kind of dampened your feeling of self-worth and self-confidence. And so maybe you didn't go to, post-secondary because you thought, I'm not smart enough. I was always told I was super dumb, so I'm not going to go to school. So you're not going to get that education that can maybe get you a better paying job that can maybe help you then pay for all these things. You never, took any risks because you were told you were going to fail, so why bother? And so these little things that maybe you learned in childhood, you don't realize are not only affecting just like your life now, but also your finances because maybe, you don't think you're smart enough to get a good job, to learn how to invest because, that seems really complex, to own a home. I could never do that. That's like a pretty common thing I see with people that have come from that kind of childhood where they didn't think that they were worth anything. And so they bring that into adulthood. They still don't think they're worth anything. So what's the point in investing in myself?
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel that in the sense that, I think sometimes too, and like I grew up not personally having a lot of money. When my parents got divorced, I felt like, money was a thing that seemed to bring a lot of like conflict into the relationship between my parents and my relationship with them and paying for things. And so, like I feel like I kind of developed this feeling of like money was bad, like and trying to have money was bad. And so like whenever I'd have extra money, I wanted almost like to get rid of it. Like I'll just go and buy this thing that like will make me feel better, or like share it with other people, or anything to like keep myself from accumulating it and almost feeling like bad about the idea of having it. Like, oh, the more money I have, like it means that maybe I'm a bad person.
It's funny that you mentioned that. There's like a story in the book very similar, a little bit of a different background in that they grew up in a family that had wealth, but there was a lot of expectations attached to that money. And so the parents really wanted that their child, the son, to, have a certain type of job, to look a certain way so they could, keep up appearances. And he's like, I just want to be a musician. And because he rebelled against his parents' ideals, he was also rebelling and kind of rejecting money, because money meant strings attached, and he never wanted that life. And so until he met someone who kind of made him kind of realize what he was doing, he would give his money away. He just like wasn't responsible with it, because he only associated money with things that were negative and bad, and he didn't want it anywhere near him. And that's one reaction. But people can go the opposite way, where maybe based off of their upbringing and some of the experiences they had, they will hoard money. They don't want to let it go because it just was never around, and they're afraid of being in the same situation growing up. It's like, I never want to be that poor again, so I'm going to hoard my money. I'm going to put it in my account. I'm going to live below my means, so I always have enough, because I never want to be in a spot where I'm drowning in debt, or I have to ask a family member for money, because that was my childhood and I don't want to go back there.
It's crazy how tied, like how much our mental health can be tied to money and our thoughts and feelings around money too. Like
I know.
So many, and I feel like, the times in my life where I've felt the lowest, definitely there's a correlation to money in some way too, whether it's, feeling like you're stressed about paying bills, or, feeling like and even on the other end of the spectrum, when like maybe you have more money coming in, it's like, oh, well, you're close to burnout, trying to like earn to be able to like, try to get ahead or whatever. Like it feels like more often than not, there's a strong correlation between your mental health and money.
The other interesting part about what you just said, Brian, it makes me just kind of think about So again, like I'm one of those folks that I feel like I've had a very, very like sordid history of financial ups and downs, and like poor, like a lot of poor financial decisions. I mean, at the time didn't seem poor, because I thought, well, I'm going to be dead in 5 years, so it doesn't really fucking matter. Never going to have to worry about an RSP when you're never going to retire. But now look at me now, Mom. But like, so when you talk about like the ways that finances are tied to our mental health, and when you look at struggling with our mental health, well, I think everybody does, right? And those struggles, unless you are someone who's like chronically depressed or chronically dealing with some sort of mental health issue, those issues that we brush up against when it comes to our mental health are cyclical. And it's like they come and then they go, and then they come up again, and it's like waves. You get hit every so often, but it's consistent that these waves are going to be coming. And in going through therapy for the last year and a half, one of the big things that I've been recognizing is like trying to or learn is trying to recognize these patterns that constantly return whenever these mental health issues are coming up.
And they could be like a wave, or it could just be like everything's been good for a while, and then one thing triggers you and it forces you to become emotionally dysregulated, and then you may go back to old patterns, either using money as a form of self-soothing, or blaming money for your situation, or whatever the case. Money is a character in your life.
What are those patterns, or what are those those red flags when it comes to poor financial decision making that like people should look out for, you know, like because for me it's like the mental health thing. It's like, okay, I need to look out for, have I stopped going to the gym?
Yep.
Have I stopped drinking enough water? Have
I
you know,
started
it's
ordering
things.
Uber Eats too much?
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And so if I can recognize that that's happening, okay, I know that maybe I'm in a depressive state, or I'm heading towards a depressive state. That's me personally, right? Are there similar things like that when it comes to finances that you can look for, those red flags?
Yeah, there's kind of two components. You can look at where you were at, maybe in the recent past, like past couple days or past 30 days. If you look at your spending, look at your credit card or your bank account statements, they will reveal what your mental state was, which is why I always tell people it's a great practice. I've been doing it for years to track your spending, because it reveals a lot about what was going on, and maybe, you know, and then maybe recognize, oh, maybe I should go back to the gym. Maybe I should start, you know, sleeping more and taking care better of myself, because it's, you know, the reflection that I'm seeing in my spending is not who I want to be. And then there's also just like in the moment. And that's more, I think, the harder part is when we're in that mode of we need to make a financial decision, and it could be a very small one, like, should I buy this thing at the store that I'm at right now? Or you're at Costco, and you're like, I came here for one thing and my cart is full somehow. You need to check on yourself to be like, what's going on right now? How do I feel right now? And there's a couple of ways you can do that. I mean, one suggestion, which I thought was actually really interesting, because most of us wear smart watches or, you know, Fitbits that have, you know, kind of our where we're at in terms of our heart. We can take a look to be like, ooh, where am I regulated or not? Because the number will show me if I am not, even if I can't really tell myself. So that's kind of a sciencey thing that you can always do to keep yourself in check. Or also you can just, you know, I talk about different tools in the book, but you know, really being able to better identify when you are in one of the states of, you know, fight or flight or freeze and fawn. Sometimes it's hard when you're in that state. So that's why I always kind of tell people, if you feel like just really intense emotion, maybe you can't even label it right now, do not do anything. Put the card away and leave, even if you're like, oh, that means I have to come back. Yeah. Because you only are going to make really good financial decisions for you and future you when you're in a place of emotional regulation, in a place of peace and calm and logic. That's it. But often we're not in that space because life is chaotic or something happened and triggered you. And so don't do anything is the best advice.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe you will get to a place, like, because I've done so much research for this book, I'm able to pretty accurately, once, like, just minutes even after I have one of those, you know, fight or flight or whatever feelings, to identify, oh, that's what that is. Just because it's like I'm in my brain. And then I could be like, you know what? We're not going to do that. And also I'd say identifying in your past, what were some moments where you did make a financial decision that is so obviously driven by emotion that you can remind yourself, remember when you did that? And then afterwards you really didn't feel good about it and you maybe couldn't return it or undo it. And I have lots of those for myself. The year that we moved into our house, I was doing way too much, put a lot of pressure on myself, and spent a lot of money that year I was trying to fill something. And I look back on some of the things and I'm like, I remember spending money on that, and I was so mad I did that. So I remind myself of that. Be like, you don't want to be that person. Remember what happens when you spend with your emotions and not with your brain.
I mean,
Let's
it's
not
like
do that.
it's like when you go to the grocery store hungry. And
Oh
you just
gosh,
end
it's
up,
exactly.
You know, you buy
Don't
like
do it.
whatever you want.
Don't do it. Or like buy something at the grocery store, eat it in your car. And I've done this before. Me and my husband have like gone to the grocery store. We're like ravenous. I'm like, let's get some sandwiches, go in the car, eat it, settle, and then go back in.
That's such a good idea. I've never thought of doing that, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, why not?
Jessica, I'm curious about neurodivergent people and their relationships with money. As somebody with ADHD and as someone who also digests a lot of ADHD related content on social media,
Yeah.
I see a lot about spending money and how, you know, especially with the impulsive type of ADHD in particular, that can lead to, you know, emotional spending and things like that. Have you learned much about neurodivergent folks and like and their relationship with money?
Yeah. I mean, one thing, I mean, this isn't my book, but I'd recommend it because she is neurodivergent, is Lise Fulmore. She's another Canadian author who came out with a book called Keeping Finance Personal, literally wrote a book for people with ADHD, which is pretty incredible. But there is a little section in my book that does address ADHD, but it's more in the, we do talk about if you have ADHD is going to be like, that is a barrier. That is a hidden barrier no one talks about. That is going to make it harder for you to make the same logical financial decisions as someone without ADHD. That's just how it's going to be. And so you need to recognize that, and you need to put your own safeguards in place to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in those situations. But the part that we more talk about in the book is there's a deep connection between ADHD and trauma, in that there's a lot of similar kind of maybe not symptoms, but if you have ADHD, wow, that looks a lot like trauma. And what the science kind of shows, and there are lots of research that backs this, is that you're kind of more predisposed to a potential traumatic event if you have ADHD. Sometimes you may think you have ADHD. It may actually be unhealed trauma that you haven't identified, or you may have both. So, and if any of those are the case, again, it is going to be more difficult for you. And so you're going to read all those personal finance books that say, just invest your money this way and you'll be fine. You're like, why can't I do it? This is why. It's because you're working with very different rules. And so you're trying to fit into a box, but you're, I don't know, something doesn't fit into a box. Something too big. So you need to create your own system for you. Just because the frustrating thing with personal finance information is it's very one size fits all, but we aren't one size fits all. We're all unique and we all have special needs, whatever those look like. And we need to, take what works and leave what doesn't and create our own rules for our own situation. Because you're the only person that really knows you and your feelings and your spending habits. So you need to kind of create your own little system.
It feels like, one of our recent favorite guests on the podcast, Johan Hari, wrote a book, Stolen Focus, which is really like my big takeaway from reading his book was that really there's a lot of people are experiencing symptoms of ADHD because of, the dopamine that we get from using things like social
it's
media.
our environments.
And so I feel like even for folks that may not have been diagnosed with ADHD or may not have ADHD, there's probably a lot of that similar like dopamine triggers that have been firing so much in the recent world that like spending money is something that is like, oh, that it feels good. And it's probably like one of the challenges, like putting in those safeguards, as you mentioned, to like stop you from making those mistakes that you'll come to regret financially later.
Again, it's like you're using money as a way to soothe yourself into a better spot, but that it only works for such a short amount of time. So you have to do it again and again and again. And then you find yourself, there's nothing left in the bank account and I owe, $1,000 on my credit card.
Man, it's crazy. You have to be really mentally strong in this world right now because there's like every, company and organization is like almost like trying to like, they're taking all of this data and finding the most effective ways to market to people and sell shit to them. So like, we have to be stronger than we've ever been before in like making these types of decisions. Like what's crazy is for the first time ever, I got sold something in my living room. I was standing. It was
a bunch of Tupperware. He had like a bunch of women in their like mid 40s.
No, I didn't even invite anybody over.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about that other thing.
But I was standing in my living room and I noticed a light on my Alexa and I looked over and I was like, Alexa, what's my notification? And it said, hey, you have something in your shopping cart and it's just dropped $10 in price. Would you like to order it? And I was like, and I had the thought like, this is fuced up. I'm being sold to.
But also you're like, that's a good deal. Who doesn't love a good deal?
And I said yes. And it sent it to me. And I was like, wow, what a crazy, like how strong
what
do you
was
have
it?
to be to.
What was it, Brian? What was it?
I honestly can't remember now.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask him like, well, if it's something that you were planning on buying anyway, it's something that you needed, it's something that you can afford. Because I also, don't want to make you feel bad for spending money. Spending money isn't bad, But you know, if it's on, it
was
has
on
to be on your
sale.
terms,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if you're like, no, it was great, then that's great.
Yeah.
But if you're like, ooh, I wouldn't have done that if not for that
Yeah.
action happening.
It,
yeah,
it
that's
was
scary.
it was a foxtail butt plug. But I mean, whatever. That's neither here
Well,
nor
maybe
there.
that is a
They're-
need.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they're almost never on sale. So.
They're almost never on sale, so gotta take advantage.
I mean, what would you say? You know, I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right now who's like, okay, you know, yes, all right, this is my moment. I have some work to do. I want to be better with my money. I want to like take a look at my past traumas and look at how this is like affecting me. But like that also takes a lot of like unlearning. What are some of the things that some of the unlearnings that people might want to try to wrap their head around when it comes to money?
Yeah. So the good thing with the book is it does give you kind of it guides you from kind of start to finish, so you don't feel like overwhelmed with information. And there's exercises at the end of every single chapter to get you to ask yourself certain questions, write all these down. And even throughout the chapters, there's sometimes exercises to, you know, write down how you feel, write down what you think. So then you can look back to see where you're at, where you want to go, and what are some things that you need to work on. But ultimately, for like that long-term life-changing help, there is a whole section in the back, and I share my own journey as I went through writing the book. I went on my own personal journey of, you know, ultimately we all, I feel like, need to get professional help from a therapist, because most people think their money issues are about money, so they go find a financial professional. An advisor, a financial planner can only help you with the numbers, but they won't help you with any of that underlying stuff. And so for that underlying stuff that may be somehow connected to money, you actually need a mental health professional, and you need to find a therapist that can help you unlock things that you can't see for yourself. Like, you can't therapize yourself. You can't do it on your own. I've tried. Doesn't work. You need to find someone who could pinpoint things that you said, and they're like, have you thought about it this way? Or, I mean, there's so many different forms of therapy. I go through a few. I went through so much therapy the year I wrote the book, which is why I took the year off in 2024. I'm like, I've done enough for 2 years. But, you know, there is regular talk therapy. There's CBT. The ones that I really focused on in the book, which were really interesting and really helped me move the dial in my own journey, was EMDR and internal family systems. Things, 2 forms of therapy most people may not be familiar with unless you're really into that space. But they were very, very effective for me to unlock some things that were buried so deep that, again, I didn't realize were affecting my personal life, but also my finances, and have been a driving force for me to, why was I so obsessed with money? Why do I never feel like I have enough or I'm good enough? Why am I never satisfied no matter how high I take my career? Oh, it's all of these things. And I wouldn't have known that unless I worked with someone who was able to help me identify those.
Yeah.
But with that said, because this may be your next question, therapy is not free and it's not cheap. And so I do have a section on what do you do when you're in a spot where I don't have insurance or I can't afford to pay? What do I do?
Buy
And
a
so-
tarot deck. A deck of tarot cards. That's it right there.
I mean, you know, whatever works. But we talk about there are some tools that you can do right now to make sure that you understand how to properly self-regulate when you get into that space of, I don't know what here's some money. You know, we don't want to do that. So there are some tools I provide that you can easily memorize or put them in your phone. So when you feel, you know, really ramped up, you can look, oh, right, this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do like the physiological sigh right now or something like that. And then I talk about, okay, once we know those tools that are free and you can start using right away, we need to take a look at your money so we can carve out some room so you can hire professional help. And this is where, you know, again, some people will have it is a financial issue. There's not enough money. And so with that, you can't cut back anymore. We need to find a way for you to earn more so you can afford that. Because then when you get that professional help, that will just get you to that next level to open up. Okay, you know, why do I feel like I can't earn any more money? You know, and so I do provide a, you know, very specific guide on how to create a spending plan, how to identify your cash flow, how to free up some of that money, so then you can be in a spot where you can easily afford maybe $200 a month on therapy.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think of like with the EMDR piece, I would butcher it to try to explain to anybody what EMDR is, even though I do EMDR.
No, I know. It's one of those things where like I did it. It is hard to describe.
Yes.
So I'm not even probably going to do a good job, but it basically is a way to stimulate both sides of your brain so you can process trauma in a way that you can't do just by talking about it. And there's a few different ways. I don't know which way you've done it, but I did it I was going to just go to one session just so I can better describe it. And I went to like 10. So I'm like, let's keep going. I think I'm not done here. And I did it where it was an EMDR machine where I had these things in my palms and it pulsed one after the other in order to stimulate each side of my brain. And then my therapist would ask me questions and I would kind of introduce what was going on, what was the trauma, kind of better understanding it so I can kind of reprocess it. And that's really what it is. It's about reprocessing a trauma so you can move on.
Yeah,
it's basically like a form of like somatic therapy, but like the somatic element is it's not like moving your body. It's just your eyeballs. It's like like the somatic is coming from like the movement of your eyes, which I think is just really.
I find the
really
thing
neat.
though that I feel is like the outcome of doing EMDR therapy with my therapist is this like better, more in touch feeling of like where trauma feels in my body.
Yeah.
And so like when you talk about being in an emotionally regulated state, part of that for me is like that feeling of like, okay, I understand this feeling of like anxiousness or like where this idea of like where the trauma lives in my body.
Yeah.
And when I feel that response, I can then know that it's maybe not the best to make, decision X at that time or whatever. But the other thing is like, for people who can't afford therapy right now, I think another, like the big question that I ask myself a lot when I'm trying to find my way back to an emotionally regulated state is, am I sleeping?
Yep.
Am I exercising? And am I eating healthy? And if the answers aren't yes to all of those things, then that's at least a place to start for me.
Very easy
to get
place
back
to start.
Feeling more emotionally regulated.
Yeah, one thing that I realized before writing this book that I wasn't doing was exercise. And I think part of it was I blamed the pandemic. I'm like, well, I can't go to a workout class, and I really like those classes. And I just could not get the motivation to work out at home. I tried doing that all throughout my 20s with tapes and stuff. I couldn't do it. And so I stopped working out, and that had a huge impact on my mood that I did not realize. And so while I was writing the book, which is funny because I thought, oh, there's no way I can add one extra thing on. Like, this is the really important project. I have to put all of my mental capacity into this one thing. But I forced myself to start working out again and going to workout classes, and I still go, and it's been the hugest change for my mental health. Like, I used to get into more frequent bouts of depression throughout the year, triggered by something. But now I really don't as much because I have this release that I do this thing. It's really physically difficult. I'm out of my head. I'm just thinking about lifting weights or whatever. And I come back home so much more clear-headed. But yeah, those are the simple things. Exercise, eat well, sleep well, take an account of how does your body feel? Are you cold? Are you tired? Are you, too hot? We want to be in a good physical state so we can be in a good mental state.
I feel like again, talking about money for a lot of people, it's overwhelming, and if anybody who kind of relates to that statement and you're still listening, fuck yeah, good for you. For that person that's listening that does find this overwhelming, in a world where there is so much fucking noise when it comes to money, what are the things that you would say to those people who find money and finances overwhelming, yet they want to take a step in the right direction? Where should they be looking for sound, good financial advice? And where should they not be looking?
That's a hard question to answer, just because some of the places that you should look have good and bad, people.
Sure. Right.
So it's like there's a lot of great people online that have really great things to say that I'm like, yes, that's perfect. In the exact same space, someone could be saying the exact opposite. So you have to be careful who you trust. In general, though, I always say look for people who actually have some kind of education in finance or background. But even again, there are some players who do, and they still say things that aren't so great. And, you know, when you are looking for that specific financial advice, you really do want someone with some sort of designation and preferably someone who is a fee-only financial planner. So someone who doesn't make money off of commissions or selling you a product, but you pay them a flat fee and then they just provide advice. They're just the least biased people out there. But in terms of like kind of what you're saying, you know, people are very overwhelmed when it comes to money. And just FYI, sometimes I get overwhelmed by it. It's a very natural feeling because it's a really important thing in our lives. It's sometimes the make or break of us, right? If we don't have our money together, everything else seems to fall apart. So it's very normal to feel like that. But the things that I think might be overwhelming is just all of the noise, all the stuff around you, whereas we need to really get back to the roots of your money is the only money that matters. Your life and your decisions and what you do with it is the only thing that matters. So stop listening to people's opinions or, you know, people online that are saying you should do this. They don't know you. They're not even talking to you. They're talking to an audience. They're in their house making a video. They don't know anything about you. So don't take that as advice. You need to really put the focus back on you and your journey and your needs, which is difficult when it just seems like there's just noise from every corner. But part of my journey throughout the book especially was how can we put those earmuffs on when we need to? How can we get back to a place of let's put it back on me. Let's put the focus back on me because this is what matters. And I guess the other component is I really wrote the book for anyone in any situation, any demographic, any age group, because most people have been living a certain way with their finances and they could be they could be retired by now. Doesn't mean it's too late for you. You're still going to probably live for another couple of decades. And wouldn't you want to live the next couple of decades feeling so much better about your finances? Even if there's not actually anything you're going to change with it, wouldn't you want to feel better about money instead of it being like a negative thing that makes you feel bad? So it's never too late to make any kind of mindset shift or change in your life, despite what people think, because I feel like a lot of financial content is very youth focused. It's very like, I got $1 million by 25. And so when you're, 35 or 38 like me, you're like, well, I feel like a piece of crap because I didn't reach that goal. Most people don't, And so don't pay attention to that. It's a distraction. It's going to get you scrolling for hours instead of you using those hours to actually help yourself in a better way.
Jess, I love talking to you. You get me fired up about money. No one in the world has ever done that before.
I agree.
It's a fucking shocking, astounding feat, and we just love you. We love the work that you do. Folks, Everything But Money, it's available now. Go out, buy the book. Where can people find the book?
Yeah.
Where can people find you and stay up to date with the work that you are doing? Plug everything.
Okay, so Everything But Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. It's out December 31st, 2024. And you can find it at all book retailers, but you can find information very easily just at my website, jessicamoorhouse.com/book. You can also follow me on Instagram at Jessica I. Moorhouse. I will be updating things. I'm hopefully going to be doing a book tour across Canada, so details TBD on that. And I would also just love to hear if you do buy the book and read it, let me know what you think. And if you can give me a nice review, that would be very nice.
Sweet. This has been such a treat. Love having you in the studio, and can't wait to do it again sometime.
Same. Thanks so much for having me, guys.